And good evening, good day, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. I'm Gillis. I'm going to be your host and facilitator for today. My day job is running an impact gaming studio in Cape Town, South Africa called Sea Monster. I'm also privileged to be the chairperson of Games for Change Africa, which we're delighted to share more with you on as the hour unfolds. The goals for today really are for you to get to know a little bit more about what's happening in the African gaming space, to build trust and credibility, hopefully, to start the journey of how we might be able to work together, share experiences, and share a common purpose about using games to change the world, as we know they do. But also, we want to open the door for meaningful collaboration to highlight some of our lived experiences, talk about what's happening on the continent, answer any questions that you might have, and really just showcase what's possible when we come together around using games to change the world. So that's enough about me and the intentions for today, but I'm delighted to welcome our panelists, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So let me start with Bukola and tell us a bit about you and why you're here this evening.
Hi, thank you so much, Glenn. It's great to be here. Thank you, everyone, as well. And hello to my fellow panelists. My name is Bukola Akingbade. I'm the founder and CEO of Kucheza Gaming. We're a Lagos-based game development studio. We do three things. We work on our own IP. We have a released game called The Wild Kingdoms, which is a mobile adventure game based on Yoruba mythology. The second thing we do is that we do co-development projects. For example, we're selected by 343 to work on 2D and 3D assets for their game. And lastly, we do impact work with our games in education initiatives where we teach public school children computing through games. And lastly, I am also the convener of Lagos Games Week, an annual trade fair for the video games that takes place in Lagos. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. That's great to hear from you. Jay, do you want to take us away?
Thanks, Glenn. Hi, everybody. My name is Jay Shapiro. I'm the founder and CEO of Usiku Games in Nairobi, Kenya. We are a social impact game developer. I've been around for about 7 years, but I'm also the chairperson of PAGG, the Pan-Africa Gaming Group, which you'll hear about today, which is a collection of multiple studios all around the African continent, doing co-development work for some of the big studios around the world, and doing impact work for a number of different initiatives. So happy to join the panel. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. To the other Jay, Jayanne.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jayanne Lopez. I'm the CEO and founder of Black Girl Gamers, which is a community-powered organization that seeks to heighten Black women's voices in gaming and their equity also. We do this via events such as our World Africa Day of Play event, where we highlight a number of developers and studios on the continent to bring their projects to the wider audience and the global audience that we have, and support them in getting more kind of game discovery. We also consult with studios to ensure that characters that they create that are obviously from a Black Caribbean or African Caribbean, your African Caribbean background or African background are more authentic to the cultures that they're representing. So we consult with a number of small studios and AAA studios as well to ensure that authenticity is at the front of house. And then we also speak to the industry, especially regarding making sure that consumers and companies are aware of the culture that they've kind of perpetuated in the past, which affects marginalized gamers, especially Black gamers, and how to reverse that culture as much as we can.
Thank you, Jayanne, and always important to remind us about the big why as we get stuck into the how and what. I thank you for providing that context. Last but not least, Eyram, who's not feeling 100% today, but he's always still giving his 100%. So yeah, tell us about you.
Yes, thanks, Glenn. Yeah, so my name is Eyram Tawia. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Leti Arts, which is one of Africa's very first game studios. I think we are 16 years. We make our own IPs and also do comics alongside the IPs. And we also develop games for clients and co-produce games. So we do narrative consultings, we do just checking on characters for other studios to represent the continent, right? And we also have the Impact Wing, which is the internships and the STEAM Academy that we run. We recently launched also the first game arcade with only African games in partnership with Alliance Française, which is a commercial entity competing with the other game arcades. And we are quite happy about people coming out and building communities, finally, of the games that we built on the continent. So that is growing very fast, and we are quite happy about the turnout. And most recently, I also took a bit of sabbatical to do a PhD at Loughborough University. So I currently do gamification and politics in Loughborough University to support what we've done over the past 16 years and what everyone here is doing into a proper academic setting, which is quite interesting. Yeah, so that's fine.
Is that all, mate? It sounds like a lot.
And I teach game design.
You do. It's amazing. Tonight wouldn't have been possible without these incredible guests and bringing a diversity of views and perspectives and experiences. But of course, it also wouldn't have been possible without sponsorship. So I just wanted to give an early and quick shout out to the Halp Network, who really does incredible work raising the profile of underrepresented communities, the Pan-African Gaming Group, which Jay has given you a little bit of context on, and then Pressure Cooker, which is a sound studio in Cape Town, South Africa, competing with the very best in the world, and of course, all made possible by XDS Spark. What I thought we could do is just kind of kick off a little bit about so what's happening in Africa? What is Africa? So just a little bit, and maybe you know all of this, but it's 54 countries. There are 1.5 billion people on the continent, and the median age is just over 19. So we are the youngest continent, and we will absolutely, by sheer weight of young people, come to influence culture, music, art, and of course games over the coming decades. And you're already starting to see that. There are about 500 million people in what's called East Africa, which is where Jay is based, and then about 450 odd million in West Africa, which is where Bukola is based in Nigeria. And I don't know if you know this, but there are over 500 million smartphones on the continent already. That's more than there are in North America, all of North America. So it might not be your preconceived idea, but it's certainly not one country. It's many, made up of diverse communities. But the reality is that there are probably less than 20 gaming studios on the continent that employ more than 20 people. So if the maths just doesn't add up in some respects, and I guess that's the topic for discussion tonight. There are clearly world-class specialists able to compete with the very best in the world, but what's missing? And so I think that brings me to the first question of tonight, which is today. Sorry, I keep saying tonight because it's night for me, but you get the point. What should people know about the current state of game development on the continent? So where's the talent? Where's the momentum? What's driving? What's fueling this? So let me start with Bukola, because I know you're just fresh off your Lagos Games Week, which was a great success. And what are you hearing? What's your sentiment about what's happening out here?
So for game development on the continent, I'll speak largely about West Africa and what we saw or what we are seeing in terms of Lagos Games Week. I think for one thing, the quality of work that we saw in this year's Lagos Games Week, for example, in the pitch stage or in the indie showcase, was a lot better than last year, as an example. But the thing that really, really surprised me was that in terms of when we had the B2C day, that a lot of the attendees focused on playing the indie games, which is similar to what I think Eyram has also set up in Ghana, and I was really surprised by that. But the thing that is driving this is obviously creativity, is passion, and for us, that's what we see a lot here. Is people who have got introduced to games playing Mario, playing games like that on Commodore 64 or SNES or stuff like that, or even on mobile, but have a desire or a passion to make games and, against the odds. And I think it's quite important to also mention that there's so many other things that, as a matter of fact, that people are making games. It seems, at least here, that it is against the grain, that, they're not game design, for example, is not taught in schools. It's not something that if you told your parents you wanted to do, you get an applause or anything like that. So it's really passion driven, and that we're seeing a lot more of, that people who get into games here just love to, and I think that's quite similar in a lot of places. But we're young, and so as a continent and as a nation as well, like you mentioned, and so that drives it almost feels as if it's the naivety that still keeps people here in game development, that this is going to work, and we find them doing a lot of those games. And some make mobile games, but more importantly, even PC games, there's a lot that people are trying to build in PC. What we see though is there are excellent things that are happening, but there's still skills gaps, or just even barriers like things that from a technical perspective or power or other things. But in spite of all that, we're still seeing traction growing from a dev market here.
Yeah, it's great to hear, and it's passion, I guess, that drives all of us. It's what's brought us all into the industry initially, and there is this wicked problem about creating careers in the creative industries, and everybody's had to deal with a version of that, I guess, in some form or another. Eyram, how you run a gaming hub, you do multiple things. What's your perspective?
So I think, just as Bukola said, there's a lot at the talent side of things. It's getting much more established. As I'm here, I have parents coming in with their kids all the time because they see the esports community, they see gaming. Now they kind of understand what gaming is a bit, but they still don't know whether there's a career in there. So most of these kids are watching some of us to see, oh, okay, is there progress in their lives? So can you live full time on a gamer salary? And I tell them, hey, I have 4 kids and a wife, so I run full time on game salary. So one of the things that is interesting is the universities in Ghana and South Africa, they are now adopting gaming electives at a level. And in Africa, once universities start adopting things in a certain education level, because of the split of education and gaming, people tend to take it more serious. And from 2023, where we started our curriculum in Ashesi University, we had 22 students. The next year, we had 40 students graduate with a gaming background. And in there, they have elect degrees who understand gaming, so they can build game jams, they can actually develop games and showcase. So at that level, it's getting much more established, and we provide them internship opportunities. So as I'm here, we have about 60 interns in a virtual cycle. Some come on site to practice, and then some also do it remotely. And some of the games are also showcased in the arcade, which gives them a bit of establishment because people come around to play. I think just today, I got a random guy create a community around one of our games, Africa's Legends, and they are talking about the characters as if it's a Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or a Riot Games character. And even me, I don't know the flaws of these characters, but these guys are taking it up and strategically competing. So I think the goal is building a culture of gaming, and it cuts across both education, play, and also convincing some of the parents that, hey, this can be a career path, right? And I think from the research that I'm conducting now, I see a lot of indie gamers whose names are not out there, but they are consistently making video games. When you float a job opening, you get about at least 150 applications of people struggling for that job role from the continent and also from the diaspora. And that is telling us something, right? So I think that's the state of gaming on the continent, yeah.
So Jane, I'm gonna bring you in at this point because clearly people want to see themselves in the games. I mean, it seems so obvious, isn't it? There's a culture building piece here. What has been your experience sort of working with people on the continent?
Yeah, so with our World Africa Day of Play showcase we've done for the last 2 years now, we do essentially a mixer where we uh, bring studios and devs from the continent to mix with other people from the rest of the industry so that that heightened visibility is there, but also so that people who are from the African diaspora can also work with their counterparts on the continent and bring together projects or maybe perhaps digitally or virtually work with them. So we're trying to create this cross-contamination, this cross-pollination of ideas so that this that essentially the growth of Africa doesn't happen in a silo. So we're looking to support that. So we have that kind of mixer that we do. And then World Africa Day of Play is essentially a showcase where we've had Leti Arts in our showcase before as well. And we showcase, have different panels talking to, what's happening in gaming from the devs perspective, but also from the community's perspective. And that's something that Eyram said, something that was really interesting, because once you see these communities start to pop up, it means something's taking traction. When consumers start to talk about things in their own volition and start to really get attached to these IP, it means that the culture wants this too. So we're seeing that with not just games, but also esports. Communities like Ashita ICC by Maripo Yatiam and Fred Munga with Game Tribe. These are communities similar to mine that are popping up and trying to have impact. So from the consumer side and the community side, we're also seeing things happen. We're also seeing that traction happen. And I think, from my perspective, having gone to a conference earlier this year and listened to investors talk about what's the next frontier of gaming and not mention Africa at all, it seems like there's this kind of juxtaposition between the two markets and the understanding, because a recent KPMG report with Melio Games mentioned that Nigeria's mobile gaming has increased in revenue for 454% since 2019. But why are not investors thinking about this as a fertile area for growth? So I think there is a juxtaposition between how the industry looks at this fertile ground and this potential growth in the market, but consumers within the diaspora and within the continent are actually excited about it. So that's where I kind of slot myself in to support as much as I can. But that's what I've gained from just doing this showcase for the last 2 years and interacting with people like Eyram and Leti Arts as well.
Awesome. And I know Jay quite well. I know most of the panelists quite well, but this is Jay's excited face. So I know that he desperately wants to pick up on that last point that you made. So I'm going to ask him to come in on exactly that point about the potential on the continent.
Yeah, I'm so in a completely agreement with what Jan was just saying, right? In terms of the mismatch that exists between the perception of Africa and the reality of what's happening on the continent, right? And I think part of that is just through social media and decades of coverage of the continent, and even in schools when we all grew up, like we all looked at maps of the world that didn't show Africa accurately. I'm excited to hear about Bukola and what's happening at Lagos Game Week. But to give you a sense of it, Lagos is as far from Nairobi as Anchorage, Alaska is from Orlando, right? And people just don't understand the scale of what's happening on the continent. We have twice as many youth as China. There are more internet-connected smartphones, as Glenn mentioned at the beginning, than all of Europe combined, and it's still growing at 20% year over year, whereas markets like the US are growing at 2%. There's more middle class in Africa already, and so when you than the US. So when you look at all of those factors combined, Africa is on track to become the #3 market globally for mobile games. And so for anybody who's sitting in a studio like Riot or King or an Xbox team or whatever, Africa is the source of their next billion players. And when we look at, from a historical perspective, the markets of China, Japan, and Korea as large gaming markets, in each of those countries, of the top 5 games, at least 4 of them are domestically produced, because players want to see themselves reflected in the games that they play. They want their local language, they want local music, they want local characters and environments. And so that means for what's essentially going to become a third of the population of gamers globally, they want African narratives and stories and characters. And so building games on the continent is about to become incredibly important. And it's our task now. It's sort of a race to scale to be able to accommodate that.
Jay, I want to bring in a parallel from another industry and something that most people might not know. So AWS is substantially built in Cape Town. There are over 3,000 engineers. This is not a call center. This is not a help desk. The cloud, the Amazon cloud, is substantially built in Cape Town. And that can be verified. And I think that also just goes to show the depth of the engineering capability that is available on the continent. And so just before I ask you the follow-up question, I hope already what we're doing is we're sparking XDS Spark, sparking some questions. So there is a Q&A function, as I'm sure you're all familiar with on Zoom. So start racking and stacking them. We'll try and get through as many as we can. But they're also very good for us to get a sense of what you want to hear more of in the time that we have available. And then also, because today is the first conversation, not the last one, we want to get them. So yeah, please start popping your questions in there. But Jay, just straight back to you. So what's happening? Where are the creative services? What's good looking like right now on the continent? And what are you most proud of?
Yeah, so what I'm most proud of is the reach of African developers, not just for African players, but really reaching the global market. So 3 times this year, the Apple Game of the Day in 21 countries was about a Tanzanian gecko, a game that PAGG produced called Electric Blue. The #1 hyper-casual game last year in I think it was 27 countries. I'm trying to remember how the number was by a Kenyan studio, Meken Games, with a game called The President. So really, we're starting to reach out with those narratives, and certainly Electronic Arts has been pushing that with Salim, Abubakar Salim, out of the UK, and now a new release with Relooted coming out of South Africa. Like, we're starting to make those inroads, and that's really exciting to see. In terms of external development, there is definitely work happening across the continent for EA, for Riot, for Disney. And really that falls into 3 main categories, right? So that's in terms of traditional XDev, coding and visual assets. That's traditional. And we see a lot of that in Eastern Europe and certainly in India. But then also a lot of work around the cultural authenticity, right? Leti Arts, I think, has a great example of creating a character for Valorant. We're doing work with some of the EA franchises. We have hair designers and fashion designers and cultural anthropologists, shout out to Casioka, and architects, etc., and saying, if you're going to make games about Africa, then it has to be authentic and relevant. And then lastly is QA. There's huge QA teams in the Philippines with Elevated Play, and really looking at now, how do we build that on the continent for providing QA services for studios as well. So there's a lot of areas of growth, and the main thing is just sort of changing this perception of Africa from being a destination for charity into being a source of innovation and professionalism.
Yeah, absolutely. To the extent that mobile web first is at least a new frontier, it's also, one of the oldest distribution platforms. We are going to be innovating in that space. We have to, at least in one category of gaming. It's going to require us to find new business models, new distribution systems, and that's partly the thing that excites me the most. Eyram, if I had to say to you, what one thing? I mean, it's hard. You've been doing this for 16 years, mate. like just the fact that you still exist as a gaming studio, I'm very proud of that for you. But yeah, like what's world class look like for you today?
For me, I think the industry is now established. You know, most of us came in very early and did all the cycles within 5 years, and now doing all the cycles again and doing all the cycles again in different times, right? So there's no blueprint of doing something different. It's just doing the same thing in different times that people now understand better. So that's what we've been running, and that's what has been our secret, to keep fresh, to keep IPs, to also appeal to different studios, do co-productions, do partnerships, enter the academia space. Just make sure an industry is being built, not just a studio. So that has been the whole idea. And currently, you could see the trajectory growing. Like we have about 25 full-time staff now and over 60 interns. And we have a program where you do 3 months internships just to learn. And in that internships, you are building video games in HTML5, and then we put it on unusual stores like Ioba, Huawei. Those stores have a lot of engagement. So I can say that we have over 1 million players for our video games now. You may not see it on Google Play, but it's happening on unusual stores. And those are the people, like the kids of the market women, just go to Ioba, go to zero-rated service, and then they just play from there. So they are able to play the games from there without any data and all that. So those are some of the things. And for us, the strategy is just to empower as many people as possible to also create their studios. And we can now invest in those studios and push them through connections and then give them global exposure. So those are some of the things that TS has been on. And as Jay said, in terms of narrative, I think Africans are now widely awake to decolonize what the West has told us for a long time, right? I see companies from DR Congo making games of the war times. Those days we used to play Delta Force and it's always an Arab, but like now we have games, African players putting that. So when you play that game, you can now, though it's just a shooter, it's happening in DR Congo. So the story can now resonate, you know. And I think with something with the character Astra in Valorant, which we did the narrative consulting on. When you look at how real her voice is, I think they are getting so many Ghanaian players because she is true Ghanaian. Ghanaians want to see, hey, Charlie, and all those things, right? And there's a joke in her lines that I think Nigerians have not realized yet. There was a time she said, hey, this is like a Nigerian cooking jollof, abomination. So Astra is telling you that Nigeria's cooking jollof is abomination. Bukola, 1 meal, okay? So you see, so
I'm going to come in and I'm going to referee this one. But I think you're making a collection of good points amongst us about, yes, while there's young people coming into the industry and it's important that we do game jams, important that we showcase what's possible, there's also world-class expertise that's available on the continent, and it's not one size fits all. It's not like the first time we're making a game. I mean, Sea Monster, we've survived delivering over 80 games of various kinds, and so it's people expect, hey, we want to tell you about game design. I mean, like, okay, great, but this is not necessarily our first rodeo. We've got a lot to learn, but we've also got this world-class skill. So that I hope at least one point that's landing today is this idea that, yes, there's this incredible pent-up demand, this incredible passion to see yourself in the world, and that those authentic stories that you're talking about there resonate everywhere in the world, because authenticity is the thing that I think we're talking at here. But yeah, Bukola, let's just talk about some of the challenges. So if there's this potential, preventing us from achieving greatness. How do we navigate this, and how do we start to talk about collaboration? This is XDS after all, and the audience is interested in how 1 + 1 = 3. So how do we start to unlock the potential together?
So first, I'll just try to set a bit of context in terms of what the challenges typically are. Initially, I'd mentioned that education, just in terms of skills and skills gap in like structured academia, at least here in Nigeria, it isn't like that. But people are self-taught, and there's with being self-taught, you know how to do some of those things. Like I mentioned, so you're skilled, but you haven't really practiced on AAA games, for example, or things that somebody who is better or some type of mentor hasn't actually helped you to be a little bit more confident about the skills you actually have. So that's one challenge. Another challenge, for example, is most people who may be listening have probably little context about power outages or failures, right? There are places in Lagos who haven't seen light for days, like power. I mean, their homes for days, right? And they're not in poor locations. It is, just what it is sometimes. They should do, before we get to even devices. So you have high-end devices, you may be able to get one on credit through Amazon, or just by a click of a button. You don't really think about that hump. That hump it's not just the hump in terms of access, which is one level. It's also a hump in terms of affordability. Then you move to things like, oh yes, so you've managed to cross all these things, and you're now good at developing and making a game, and people are actually interested. And so you get to dev kits, for example, and getting a dev kit to you becomes even more challenging. Or getting on Steam as a Nigerian. Most times we're not, like, Nigeria doesn't even feature from trying to get a Steam account as a game developer, for example. You have to go through multiple hoops. Or let's talk about Apple developer accounts that you need to get somebody in the US and send them your login for them to help you pay, or stuff like that, which wasn't the case a few years ago, by the way. But it is a challenge that most people don't tend to have. Then before we get into data and actual infrastructure, so there's so many things, but still, in spite of all this, we still make it work. I think that resilience, that tenacity, that passion, that can-do attitude, as well as slaying it every day, getting results, is ingrained in most Africans, right? So that is who we are. So for example, if we take a parallel from the tech industry, we have unicorns on the continent. You have quite a few of them from Nigeria, for example. A lot of those unicorns were self-taught. It wasn't like they went, there was a lot of structure in getting them to where they were. They just started doing this, and then you had startups that like Andela and some other people who were able to put talent together and train them, and get clients from it, like similar co-development kind of situation, and get them to support on global projects, et cetera, et cetera. And fast forward 6 or 7 years, our tech industry is what it is, right? And we have even as many more unicorns in the last 2 or 3 years than we've had in the last 10. So we can get this done. Now, to get this done, though, we need people on the other side who also believe that the change is possible, or that there's value to be had on both sides. So I'll give an example. And an experience we had about 2 years ago with 343, I can clearly say that a lot of the interaction with 343, or even in other cases where we've done co-development projects, or areas where people have taken a chance, so to speak, in terms of us getting to do 2D or 3D art for their game project, is because somebody chose to ask a different question. We in Nigeria and most of the English-speaking Africa, we speak English. Like English is our first language. For most of Europe, we're either in the same time zone or an hour, worst case maybe 2. So we're like in the actual zone of being a good market. So the question is, why is this the case? Our argument actually is that we don't, for where Africa needs to go from a code development or video games ecosystem, we don't just need projects. We do need projects, but we need a bit more. We need projects that allow us to do the work and get some kind of upskilling or mentoring as part of that process. Not because we're not good, we are good, but we still have a lot to learn, like Glenn, you mentioned as well. But we need, I suppose, some type of opportunity with purpose. So if we're trying to color a niche, that would be my proposition.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you say that, because we've always got this price perception about, oh, okay, so this is the next cheap outsourced destination. This is the next Philippines or Eastern Europe, and yet there's this quality cultural relevance sort of triangle that we're kind of all starting to describe here. And yeah, we're probably not going to be the cheapest place in the world. Definitely, we're going to offer a cost advantage. But I'm hearing you say that there's a lot of other values that we're delivering on, including, of course, access to, as Jay puts it, the next billion customers. So what, Jay, if I may ask you to come in on this one, what are we missing here in terms of the relationship between Western studios and the African potential?
I think it's trust. I think it's trust and experience. We ran the Green Game Summit last year together with the UN Environment Program, and we had senior leadership come in from Supercell, from Saibo, from Xbox and Sony, and they left Nairobi with a much different understanding of going, oh, like there's stuff happening here. People are not running around in grass huts. And once people get past the stereotypes of Africa and understand the professionalism, the development, the scale, all of a sudden, we get that first pilot project, and all of a sudden we go, oh, actually this works. And now, for example, Carnegie Mellon, the ETC, the Entertainment Technology Center, are looking at setting up a whole campus in Rwanda. 343 are getting obviously much more involved, as Bukola was saying. Xbox are running the Game Camp Africa for the third time this year. It then starts to scale. And what's ironic is that, Eyram mentioned he's been doing this for 16 years. I know, Glenn, you've been banging away at it for more than a decade as well. And yet somehow now we're at day one. Right? Like it took all that time for the pre-work, and now we're at that inflection point where it's really starting to take off, and it's exciting to see.
Yeah, and I think, John, I do want to bring you in on this issue of the trust deficit, I guess, of the lack of understanding. But before I do, I just want to comment also on a recent experience. So I mentioned in the opening that I serve as the chairperson of Games for Change. Eyram's also on the advisory board of that, as is others. And I was just back from the global conference in New York a couple of weeks back. And, when we talk about the kinds of work that we're doing in the impact gaming space, people are truly amazed at the production value, the way that we're doing it, the way that we're thinking about it, the way that it's still a game, that it is linked to a purpose. I mean, we do a lot of work in financial education, for example, entrepreneurship. We're using games to drive those kinds of outcomes. And our games are winning awards globally. They're not winning game awards, but what they're doing is they're winning impact awards against the very best studios in the world, with often much bigger budgets, a much more mature ecosystem. And here we are punching well above our weight in that space. So, JD, and there's a disconnect here between the reality and quality of what's possible and the perception. We're back to that same thing. How do we start to close that trust gap?
Muted, apologies. I think closing that trust gap requires, and it sounds fickle, but it's PR, and it's connecting the two audiences in different ways. So, I always say there's different gaming industries within the gaming industry. You have our world, which is the industry world, which is the impact world, which is the change world, but then you also have the consumer world, and their gaming industry is completely different, and it's been molded by absence of blackness, if we're going to be honest, absence of femme characters as well, absence of specific representations. And so the quote unquote not winning the game awards, etc., those are where the consumers are more focused. So where those kind of more impact games are happening and having impact, they mean a lot to us. They mean a lot to the people they're impacting, but to the greater consumers, they're not getting that wider perception. Having and it's also a bias problem in like gaming media. So with Black Girl Gamers, that's why we do World Africa Day of Play, because we want to undo that bias of only looking at games from the West and only looking at games from Asia as well. So having those platforms like Black Girl Gamers, but also I guess what we do, which is call platforms out. Why aren't you covering games from Africa? Why is that not happening? IGN, what are you doing? You know, there's a if there's these statistics and this impact happening, why aren't you doing this? And I think in sometimes, and this is why my platform kind of began, is because I found within the space people were just too soft. They would just kind of, hi, I'm here. Hello, everyone. You kind of have to have a bit more vim to get people to notice you, because they are so stuck in their stereotypical ways. They're so stuck in their own silos. And that's not to you know, make it negative. It's just that people grow up and they expose to what they're exposed to. But you kind of have to push through to get exposed to those things. So the IGNs reaching out to them, why aren't you at this Game for Change? Why aren't you talking about this, as well as, you know, the latest indie game that's now got everyone falling off mountains, you know? I also think it's connecting to the content creators and the content creators that would be interested in this space. The ones that do predominantly game discovery, those are the ones where you can tap into. So sometimes it's not just making the quality of the game, but if you don't have a robust marketing or PR strategy, you're not going to get in those spaces and those realms. So how do you build that? You need people in the ground, consumers, and other people to consult on, okay, this is the person that's telling all these people about games. They get 30,000 views every video they do. Maybe you should get them to do a video on your game and talk about impact. And so it's kind of you need to connect not just with, you know, the industry and the impact, but you need to connect with the consumers and find those appropriate subcultures that will support the game. And, you know, that's what we kind of do as well. So
Yeah,
it's interesting, because when it comes to like projects that are speaking about Africa, or projects that are speaking about Blackness, it's always necessarily about impact, and that's great, but we also need to think about, okay, marketability and getting ourselves out there.
Yeah, what you're talking about is a ready-made audience, and going out and making communities, and then those communities will be your first customers and your fans and so on. But again, you know, today's session with XDS Spark and Halp Network, I guess that's exactly what we're all trying to do, which is to say, you know, there is this incredible opportunity in many, many different forms. And so let's go. We've got 18 minutes or so to go. And so I know there are a couple more things that we wanted to chat about, but I also wanted to jump into some of the questions. So I'll start with Kenneth's question, which is really around the volatility of the African market, and how do you approach the world of gaming and make a profit? Kenneth, my first comment on that one is, you know, welcome to the world of gaming everywhere. Right now, I think the business models everywhere are under question. You know, we're seeing some of the most established names in industry realizing that the world has changed dramatically. You know, so we're seeing the tragic layoffs, but we're also seeing big brands starting to really think about where growth comes from. To Jay's point earlier, you know, Western markets are maturing. Yes, of course, we've got our own set of challenges. We've got our own set of issues. They are small business issues. That's one thing. Creative industry issues, another thing. Game industry issues, a separate dynamic. And then, of course, competing in the world, you know, international competition is another dynamic. So I don't think there's a quick or easy answer to it. I don't mean to make light of it. It is my everyday question about how do we find this beautiful flywheel, which says, to Jane's point, they're communities that care. And if we can do something authentic with them, and we can tell those stories and create them here, you get this beautiful flywheel going. And that creates this ecosystem of viable game studios. We clearly can't do it alone. And I would argue that no studio anywhere has ever done it alone. It has always been born out of an ecosystem. So, Bukola, I see you nodding. Do you want to come into this? Because, yeah, you also run a game studio.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. One of the big things that we've experienced in the community, and, you know, I have to speak quite highly, actually, of the Nigerian game development community, as well as even Eyram as well from Ghana. We've collaborated with or advised us on some things that we work on, Meccan Games, like so many other. Glenn, you and I have had a couple of conversations as well. But I think the industry we tend to I think we're getting to a point where we understand that we can't do it alone. I think that's clear. 16 years in, I'm sure Eyram will tell you exactly the same thing. You cannot do it alone. It just doesn't work that way. But I think increasingly though, we're starting to see, like you're saying about day one, we're starting to see things happen. But for me, from all the study I've done in trying to understand how markets or ecosystems have been built, personally, I don't see any other way apart from put one seat of your table in terms of IP, put the other in terms of co-development work. And that's it. You have to keep doing that until you find that balance. But the truth is, on the other side is, and I love the example of that you gave about the character in Valorant. I would love representation of African culture in large titles even more. Like, I would love us to do our IP and make it, of course I will. But either way for me works. Like, as long as the world sees more beauty and color, I'm happy. And I think increasingly that openness and that willingness to have these kinds of conversations, I think is what, in my more recent experience, is moving our ecosystem forward.
Eyram, do you want to come in on this point and maybe also just link into the question from Carla? Carla's saying, if somebody's considering opening a studio, where would you start? And, the talent question, I think we've addressed somewhat the question here about tax credits and other things. So what's that reality like for you? What is your suggestion for Carla?
Yes, so I think one advice is don't start the studio making just one game. Start a studio that you are going to make several games, and then the first title that you build is just one. And you need to build a community right from the onset. That's what we have learned now. As you are making the game, you need to have a small community testing, giving out feedback, and that's the trajectory that's happening now. However, there's also a lot with partnerships. Like when I was starting the gaming curriculum in the university, though it was structured by my own curriculum, I'm self-taught, but I've been invited to make a curriculum at university level as well. So that's a reality from Africa, right? And for the university to invite you to do that, then that is a high level of trust. So I had to bring in a Finnish partner, which is Maitel, Natasha Scott, who has the experience in teaching like at very top level game design. So we co-teach together and we own that curriculum together and delivering top-notch gaming studies in that university. So some of these guys, when going to start studios, they understand that collaboration already, right? That, hey, when you start something, you don't have to do everything. You can look out for other partners to help you launch. And one of the things I also say to people is, which Leti has done, evaluating our 16 years, anytime that people come into Leti Arts, not to discriminate, but we always have expertise. So since last year, we've gone 100% upskilling local talent. So our studio producer is locally groomed from the pipe, from internship to national service to work experience to producer. So almost everyone is local talent, and we are feeling the impact now. So we are upskilling skill sets, right? So people, and then the experts advise them. So I still have very top game design expertise and industry people who just advise upscaling. So I think what we need to do as studios is to convert our mind and just invest in local talent rigorously and yank them from beginners to top positions, making room for their mistakes, but still correcting them along the way when they are working on projects.
Yeah, and I think a point very well made. I'm hearing predictable demand, and it's not a direct answer, Carla, to your question, but there are studios here. There are people doing things already. Is it opening a studio or is it partnering with a studio? Is it what problem are we trying to solve for? And that is this predictable demand. How do you make games? Well, you make them, and we figure this stuff out together. And as we get this beautiful ratcheting effect, a mentor is only as good as the quality of the questions that is being asked of that person. And so these light touch, it's nice to come in and do something amazing and fall in love with this incredible continent. But that's one thing. The other thing to do is long-term projects where we start to scale together, where we don't just have an occasional conversation, but we're literally in the trenches together, figuring out some of these wicked challenges together. So for me, the answer is more that not that we've got a supply problem, we've got a demand problem. And to Eyram's point, very well made. It'll feed in from the bottom, it'll grow from the middle, and it'll create these incredible ecosystems of creativity, profitability. To your question too about how do we do this? Well, you can't do it on your own. You need long-term, predictable, scaling demand where we kind of learn these things and figure them out together. So Jay, I know this is also something very close to your heart and something at the absolute core of what the Pan-African group came together to do. So tell us a little bit more about that and address some of,
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Glenn. There's a few points in there, I think, and I also want to address Carla and her question as well. The Pan-African Gaming Group was created. We launched in February 2022 to bring together the top studios that existed around the continent in the recognition that all of us were small scale. There was great work happening, but none of us were big enough to really be able to collaborate or compete with the global studios. And so by combining all of our efforts and working as a single umbrella, has allowed us to now sort of tap into that market and do some really quite incredible projects. But that being said, I'm not going to sort of a little bit hypocritical argue with myself. To Carla's question about where in Africa, would you open a studio, is to recognize that Africa doesn't exist. Right? We are 55 different countries with different cultures and different environments. And so there are pockets of talent that exist around the continent that are very different from each other. There's a great community in Morocco already. There's some substantial work happening in Tunisia in the hyper-casual space. In Egypt, there's a great community. In Joburg and in Cape Town, there's really strong XDev work. In Kenya, there's really strong work from a social impact perspective with a number of studios working on that. In Nigeria, I think they're just hanging out and having a good time, but I've heard that there's some good studios there as well. If the lights will come back on.
One near zero. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, Bukola. You gotta take a shot. No, but to answer also Eyram's point around talent, if things go the way that they inevitably seem to be heading, we're going to need thousands of people in this industry around the continent. And that's why we keep talking about talent and capacity building and why it's so important. And programs like the internships that Eyram has created, the accelerator that we've built in Nairobi, et cetera, all the YouTube videos are all great for teaching people what to do and how to use tools. But what we can't teach them is what not to do, right? That needs to come from wisdom and experience. And so I just want to reach out and say, like, any of the diaspora who are maybe watching this webinar today, and might have been affected by some of the layoffs that are happening in the West and the difficulties in the industry, like, now's the time to come home, right? There is an industry here that needs your experience, and it's an exciting place to be. And so I think that's a really important part as well for us to build this sector across the continent.
And I think it links brilliantly to Gary's point about, what do we think about sound engineers in South Africa generally. And I don't know that many people know this, but Cape Town, for example, is really one of the top 5 runaway film destinations in the world. You have watched many, many movies and TV series that are being filmed and produced in South Africa. So you wouldn't even know that you're watching those movies. And yes, sound design, I think we've got an incredible edge. Both technically, we're able to compete against the very best in the world. It's a massive unfair advantage to us because, again, you've got a price advantage to being able to do that. And that's not even starting to tap into the incredible capability that the music and the African sound, those two things are in juxtaposition, as we said, technically brilliant, and then the creative potential that exists. You put those two things together, and just in that part of the industry, you've got a massive competitive advantage. Which also
that, Glenn, AI as well. There's amazing work happening on the continent.
AI is the great leveler. AI is the great leveler, for all of us. But I did want to also just say that James from Pressure Cooker, who's on the call and is a sponsor of this, is going to be hosting a table at XDS in a couple of months. And he's there to talk to you and show you what they're doing in their studio, and I think more generally what's possible from the continent. So please hook up with James from Pressure Cooker, go and see him there, have the conversation, or ask him about any of these other topics. So just as we start to wrap up in sort of 30 seconds or less, Jayan, why do you do this? What excites you most about the potential of the continent in one sentence, and then another? What one thing should our audience take away from today?
So in terms of why I do this, it's due to the fact that there's a clear imbalance in the industry, and there have been for a very long time. And I think I'm not someone that wants to allow that to happen. I know that gaming is something to do, a lot of people just see it as entertainment. For me, it's an art, it's a medium. And I don't think art should be specifically only focused on one demographic or one audience or one region. And so that's why I'm passionate about it. And that's why I'm passionate about just hearing everyone on this panel also speak and hear about their contemporary experiences regarding game development in the continent and elsewhere. In terms of one thing to take away is that I think it was yourself, Glenn, that said, asking a different question can just open up an array of possibilities for things. And I think just questioning what you see as the norm is something that people who are marginalized have to do every day. But if you're not marginalized and you have a level of privilege, then it's to ask yourself different questions and open up experiences of partnership or co-development with these studios. Open up your experience if you're in the press or in the media. Open up the opportunity to share these projects with other audiences in a light that isn't biased and in a light that isn't kind of looking at things as charity. So that's the reason why I want to do this, because I think there's so much possibility for all stories to be told in a really positive light, as opposed to just a number of few. And that's it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And to be clear, we are nobody's victims. We are not looking for anybody to be our rescuer. We are all magicians, and we need to co-create. So, everyone's on their hero's journey. Bukola, and closing remarks from you?
Yeah, thank you. So why do I do this? I got into games because I saw the change in my children. And I understood that if we don't, as an ecosystem or as a continent or as a country, speak the language of games, we're going to lose the next generation and subsequent generations. And so for me, it is not as simple as, it is fun and games, but it is something that as a continent, we need our culture in games. In our games, in global games, because it does matter in the end. So that's why I do this. The other thing I'd like to leave the audience with is Nigeria. Nigeria is well over 200 million people. We're vibrant. I'm sure tonight, in some way, shape, or form, if you're watching TV or listening to music or watching sport, you will hear our music. We are that good, even with, all the challenges, right? So even if Jay, this is at you now. Even if we're having fun and having a laugh, you know, we sneak up on you though, and you don't see us coming, but it's going to be the same in games. Nigeria is the market. So, you know, when you're thinking Africa, you know, we have challenges, true, but we're a large market.
Absolutely. And everyone's a winner in Africa. So I'll leave it at that. Jay, just a quick wrap up from you. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think my parting shot is that this is not about Africa gaming.
Oops, I think we might have lost Jay just there. Are you back? Sorry, Jay, we lost you for a second. Please come again. Yeah.
Sorry, Starlink.
Are you having internet issues in Kenya? You're in
I'm
Canada.
in Canada. I know. Third world country.
These things happen everywhere. Okay, just checking.
Absolutely. Blame Starlink. No, my final comment is that this is not about the African gaming industry. It's about the gaming industry. These are the next billion players who are going to be part of the global ecosystem. And any studio who has any franchise that they're thinking about or are currently working on needs to be thinking about Africa, because this is where your players are coming from, and they're already looking for you.
Beautiful. Eyram?
Yes, for me, it's a more political drive. What games did to me as a young man, knowing everything about Nordic mythology, not like Western cultures through video games, I want that done to them as well, knowing everything about African characters, African. So it's like I just want games to contain African stories. It's the silver bullet. It will create jobs. Like games is a beautiful work of art. It's very beautiful seeing the extreme technical side and extreme creative side. It will solve unemployment. It will provide jobs. Everybody gets to eat from the pie when making video games. So I believe that strongly. So that is a personal conviction which I'm driving, and to also establish Africa creators than consumers. So we need to create games.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I know we're out of time, and I'll take just 1 minute to wrap up and to do some quick thank you. So appreciate if anyone can stay on, but we understand if you need to drop off. So there are massive opportunities inspired in Africa, whether that's culture, whether music, talent, and also the way that we're going to use technology to come up with new business models that have not been solved anywhere in the world, not just here. There's a made in Africa opportunity. So there's an industrial creative process that's just waiting to be unlocked through partnership. There's clearly a sold in Africa opportunity, because as Jay keeps reminding us, your next billion customers are coming from here. But I think as many of us on this call are saying, there's also an owned in Africa opportunity. It's important that not all of our best talent and our best ideas are just taken from the continent, because that's just colonialism again. We have to find new models which also allow the creators to benefit from this. So inspired, made, sold, and owned, the full value chain, there's opportunities everywhere. Let me wrap by saying thank you to Caroline Calaway, who you all know and love, to say thank you for making this all happen, to XDS Spark, and Chris, who's behind the scenes making this all happen, to the Halp Network for having the inspiration to bring us all together, for bringing Jayan and others into the mix, because this is the conversation of our time. Now, more important, our values matter. It's easy to think about, what's right when it's easy, but when it's tough, it's the creative industries, it's the gaming industry that needs to stand up for something that's bigger than ourselves. We don't need everybody. We just need a few people who want to leave a legacy in this country and on this continent. And yeah, to Jay's point, if you've been laid off and you're looking to do something where you can make an impact, make a difference, and make some money, you found the right place. I also wanted to thank the Pan-African Gaming Group and Pressure Cooker for sponsoring this, to remind you that we'll be following up this conversation at XDS itself, and to thank you all for giving us some of your time and attention. We'll find our contact details, where you know where to get hold of us. There are lots more questions coming. clearly this isn't the last conversation, but the first one. And I will leave you with just this. Everyone is from Africa. It's only a matter of when you left. Isn't it time to come home? Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day. Appreciate it. Thanks, panelists.